I barked at the deck boss who was coiling. I told him to take a hike or whatever. It was probably a lot more graphic than that. You're a sucker sometimes, you know?
For years, Deadliest Catch fans have believed that once a boat or a crew member earns their place on the show, they become part of television history. But that hasn't always been the case. Lately, one vessel in particular has left viewers asking the same question. What happened to the Aleutian Lady? Some claim Discovery quietly removed it. Others suspect a hidden scandal, a firing, or even an accident the cameras never showed. But as we started digging, we discovered the Aleutian Lady isn't a one-of-a-kind case. In fact, disappearances are fairly common with the show. Not just boats. The crew members as well have disappeared time and again. So, why did Aleutian Lady disappear from Deadliest Catch? Or did it even? Hold on to that question for a while, because a lot has been happening behind the scenes, and it's not good. Today, we'll unveil everything. The curse that followed Deadliest Catch. For many viewers, Deadliest Catch was supposed to be about one thing: surviving the Bering Sea. Every episode promised towering waves, freezing temperatures, and fishing vessels that could disappear beneath the ocean in seconds. But as the years passed, something unsettling began to emerge. Some of the show's most familiar faces weren't disappearing because of production decisions or storms. They were vanishing from real life. One by one, captains and deckhands who had become household names were gone, often in ways no audience could have predicted. No story changed Deadliest Catch more than that of Captain Phil Harris. Long before he became one of the show's biggest stars, Harris had built a reputation as one of the toughest crab fishermen in Alaska. As captain of the Cornelia Marie, he spent decades navigating the unforgiving Bering Sea while raising two sons, Josh and Jake, who would eventually join him on deck. By the time the show's sixth season began filming, Phil had become the emotional heart of the series, admired for his humor, experience, and willingness to let cameras capture both his triumphs and his flaws. But no one expected that those same cameras would end up documenting the final weeks of his life. On the morning of January 29, 2010, while the Cornelia Marie was unloading crab in the port of St. Paul Island, Alaska, Phil suddenly collapsed. He had suffered a massive stroke. The emergency happened in real time, with Discovery's cameras already rolling. Crew members rushed to help while paramedics transported him for emergency treatment. Viewers would later watch genuine moments of confusion, fear, and heartbreak unfold exactly as they happened. Doctors stabilized him after surgery, and for a brief period, it appeared he might recover. He was even shown speaking with his sons and trying to remain optimistic despite the severity of his condition. For several days, there was hope. Phil began rehabilitation, joking with visitors, and slowly regaining some strength. Those scenes made what followed even more devastating. On February 9, 2010, less than 2 weeks after his stroke, Captain Phil Harris died from complications related to the brain hemorrhage. He was just 53 years old. Discovery chose not to stop filming. Instead, the network documented Josh and Jake making the painful decision to say goodbye to their father. The episodes became some of the highest rated in the history of Deadliest Catch. A decade later, another familiar face was gone. Nick McGlashan wasn't a captain, but he quickly became one of the show's most recognizable deckhands after joining the crew of the Cape Caution under Captain Wild Bill Witrowski. Coming from a long family history of Alaskan crab fishermen, Nick seemed destined for life on the water. He was hardworking, outspoken, and willing to push himself through brutal conditions that would send many newcomers home. But behind the scenes, he was fighting a battle far removed from the dangers of the Bering Sea. Nick later spoke openly about his addiction to alcohol and substances. He entered rehabilitation and described reaching a point where he no longer recognized the person he had become. His honesty earned admiration from many fans, especially because addiction remains a difficult subject in the commercial fishing industry, where long seasons, physical exhaustion, chronic pain, and extended periods away from family can take an enormous mental toll. Nick's willingness to discuss recovery made him more than just another television personality. He became someone viewers hoped would overcome his struggles. That hope ended on December 27, 2020. Nick McGlashan died in Nashville, Tennessee, at just 33 years old. The medical examiner later ruled his death an accidental overdose of controlled substances. His passing sent shockwaves through both the fishing community and the show's audience. Captain Wild Bill remembered Nick as an exceptionally talented fisherman whose sense of humor could lift an entire crew, even during the hardest seasons. Only months before Nick's death, Deadliest Catch had already lost another member of its extended family. Malin Reyes, who had appeared as a deckhand aboard the Seabrook, suffered a heart attack at his home in Whitefish, Montana, during July of 2020. Despite emergency medical treatment, he never regained consciousness and died several days later at the age of 38. Then came another tragedy that few people saw coming. Todd Cochutin, a former deckhand who had appeared aboard the Patricia Lee, wasn't at sea when disaster struck. Instead, he was on a hunting trip in Alaska during February of 2021. According to authorities, Cochutin was accidentally shot during the outing and later died from his injuries. He was only 30. Many longtime fans have now begun noticing a pattern. Sometimes, a familiar face would simply stop appearing. At first, viewers naturally assumed the worst. Had something happened? Was another tragedy about to be revealed? But not every disappearance had such a heartbreaking explanation. In several cases, captains left because of retirement. Others had darker reasons. When captains fell before their boats did. Some of the show's biggest stars didn't disappear because their boats sank or because they retired. Instead, they unraveled in full view of the cameras. Perhaps no captain embodies that story better than Elliot Nys. When he first appeared on Deadliest Catch, Nys looked like the future of the fleet. While many captains had spent decades earning command, Elliot became captain of the saga in his 20s, making him one of the youngest captains ever featured on the series. His rapid rise immediately attracted attention. He was ambitious, confident, and undeniably talented. Veteran fishermen openly acknowledged that despite his age, Nys had exceptional instincts for finding crab and running a vessel. To Discovery, he represented a new generation of crab captains. To viewers, he quickly became one of the show's most fascinating personalities. But almost from the beginning, there were hints that something wasn't right. Unlike some of the older captains who projected calm authority, Elliot often appeared exhausted and emotionally volatile. His confrontations with crew members became increasingly common. His personal life frequently spilled onto the deck. Arguments over relationships, family responsibilities, and leadership began taking up as much screen time as the fishing itself. At first, many viewers simply assumed they were watching the growing pains of a young captain trying to prove himself in one of the toughest professions on Earth. Few realized those moments were part of a much larger story unfolding behind the scenes. By the middle of the series, Nys's struggles could no longer be ignored. He later admitted that he had developed a serious addiction to controlled substances while working as a commercial fisherman. According to Elliot himself, maintaining a demanding fishing schedule while secretly battling addiction became nearly impossible. The long seasons, physical exhaustion, chronic pain, and isolation that came with months at sea only deepened the problem. The signs had been there all along, but viewers didn't have the full picture until Elliot chose to reveal it himself. One of the most remarkable aspects of Elliot's story is that Deadliest Catch didn't hide it. During the show's 11th season, cameras documented him making the difficult decision to leave his boat and enter rehabilitation. Tragically, Elliot's downfall unfolded almost episode by episode. For several years after leaving Deadliest Catch, Elliot largely stayed out of the public eye. Then, during September of 2022, federal prosecutors announced charges that stunned many former viewers. According to the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Alaska, Nys admitted participating in a conspiracy to distribute significant quantities of controlled substances. Court records stated that he acted as a courier, transporting narcotics from Arizona into Alaska as part of a larger trafficking operation. In September of 2024, he was sentenced in federal court to more than 4 years in prison after pleading guilty. The captain, who had once represented the future of Deadliest Catch, had become one of its most cautionary stories. What makes Elliot's downfall especially unsettling is that audiences witnessed much of it without fully understanding what they were seeing. His anger, erratic behavior, disappearing acts, and emotional instability weren't simply dramatic television moments. In hindsight, many fans have revisited older episodes and concluded that the warning signs had been visible long before the truth became public. Meanwhile, Josh Harris's story unfolded in a completely different and arguably more shocking way. For years, Josh wasn't simply another fisherman. He was the son of Captain Phil Harris, whose death had become one of the defining moments in Deadliest Catch history. After losing his father, viewers watched Josh struggle through grief while trying to preserve the legacy of the Cornelia Marie. His determination earned enormous public sympathy. Alongside his younger brother Jake, Josh became one of the emotional centers of the series, and many fans believed they were watching the continuation of Phil Harris's story through the next generation. Over the following decade, Josh gradually transformed from grieving son into captain in his own right. Discovery expanded his role well beyond the flagship series, featuring him prominently in specials, interviews, and spin-off programs. He became one of the network's most recognizable personalities, often portrayed as someone carrying forward both his father's legacy and the traditions of Alaskan crab fishing. By the early 2020s, few people associated the Cornelia Marie with anyone other than Josh Harris. Then, almost without warning, he disappeared. There was no dramatic farewell episode, no retirement announcement, no public explanation from Discovery. Fans simply noticed that Josh stopped appearing in new promotions. Marketing materials featuring him quietly changed. Future programming centered on the Cornelia Marie was shelved, and episodes were edited to minimize his presence where possible. The real reason was far more shocking than what anyone could have anticipated. Everything was revealed through renewed public attention to decades-old court records. Journalists and internet researchers uncovered records from 1999, when Josh Harris was a juvenile. According to those records, he admitted to assaulting a minor and entered a plea in juvenile court. Because the case had occurred while Harris was a minor, many viewers had never heard about it during his years on television. Once the documents resurfaced online, they spread rapidly. Discovery never issued a detailed public statement explaining its decision. Instead, the network quietly distanced itself from Harris. Josh vanished almost overnight while remaining physically present in the fishing industry. These careers did not end because of rogue waves or mechanical failure. Their boats remained afloat. Instead, deeply personal struggles and controversies reshaped their futures in ways no storm ever could. And those weren't the only mysteries surrounding the fleet, because sometimes the captains remained while the boats vanished. The disappearance of boats, entire boats, vessels that had become as recognizable as the people steering them, suddenly vanished from the series. Sometimes there was an explanation, sometimes there wasn't. Over nearly 2 decades, viewers learned that on this show, even the most iconic vessels were never guaranteed a permanent place. No boat illustrates that better than the Cornelia Marie. Long before it became one of the most recognizable vessels on television, the Cornelia Marie had already earned its reputation in Alaska's commercial fishing industry. Built in the late 1980s and named after owners Casey McManus's wife and daughter, the vessel eventually came under the command of Captain Phil Harris. When Deadliest Catch premiered in April of 2005, Harris and the Cornelia Marie quickly became inseparable. The captain's larger-than-life personality, combined with the boat's relentless pursuit of king crab and opilio crab, made it one of the defining symbols of the series. Everything changed after Captain Phil Harris suffered his fatal stroke during January of 2010. Beyond the personal tragedy, his death created enormous uncertainty for the future of the vessel itself. Ownership questions that had existed behind the scenes suddenly became impossible to ignore. Phil had been a partial owner alongside Casey McManus, but following his death, legal and financial complications emerged regarding control of the boat and the fishing business. Meanwhile, Phil's sons, Josh and Jake Harris, hoped to continue their father's legacy despite having neither the experience nor the financial resources to simply take over one of Alaska's best-known crab boats. What happened next confused many viewers. Despite being one of the show's most popular vessels, the Cornelia Marie quietly disappeared from Deadliest Catch. It wasn't because the boat had sunk or stopped fishing. Instead, disputes involving ownership, contracts, and business arrangements kept it off the series for several years. Discovery never built an elaborate storyline around its absence. The boat simply wasn't there. Behind the scenes, however, the Cornelia Marie never truly disappeared from the fishing industry. The vessel continued operating commercially, while Josh Harris gradually worked to regain a meaningful role in its future. After years of negotiations and changing business arrangements, the boat finally returned to Deadliest Catch. Then there was the story of the Time Bandit. Captained by brothers Jonathan and Andy Hillstrand, the Time Bandit became famous for its unconventional style. While other captains often projected quiet discipline, the Hillstrands embraced humor, practical jokes, and a family atmosphere that made their boat one of the most entertaining on the series. Jonathan Hillstrand, in particular, became one of Deadliest Catch's most recognizable personalities, balancing sharp business instincts with an unpredictable sense of humor that made him a fan favorite. Then, after the conclusion of one fishing season, Jonathan announced something few viewers expected. He was retiring. Years of dangerous fishing had taken their toll, and he planned to step away from commercial crabbing to spend more time with his family. Without Jonathan at the helm, the Time Bandit also left Deadliest Catch. Unlike some departures, this one seemed final. But retirement didn't last. After several years away from the series, Jonathan Hillstrand returned, explaining that life on land simply couldn't replace life at sea. The Time Bandit rejoined the fleet, much to the surprise of longtime viewers. But the story of the saga was more complicated because the boat itself became inseparable from the career of Captain Jake Anderson. Anderson had spent years working his way through the ranks, first appearing as a greenhorn aboard the Northwestern, before eventually earning the opportunity to captain his own vessel. His rise became one of the series' most compelling long-term storylines. When he assumed command of the saga, it seemed like the culmination of years of sacrifice, persistence, and personal hardship. But unlike many viewers realized, captaining a fishing vessel doesn't necessarily mean owning it. Behind every crab boat lies an expensive business involving loans, maintenance costs, fishing permits, insurance, and partnerships. In recent years, financial challenges surrounding the saga became increasingly public. Ownership arrangements shifted, debts mounted, and Anderson eventually revealed that he had lost operational control of the vessel after financial difficulties involving the companies connected to its ownership. The saga that viewers had followed for years was effectively gone from Jake's story. Then there was the Cape Caution, captained by Wild Bill Witrowski. For years, Wild Bill represented old-school commercial fishing, demanding, uncompromising, and fiercely protective of his crew. His booming voice and unmistakable leadership style made him one of the defining personalities of modern Deadliest Catch. Yet even the toughest captains eventually confront a reality no amount of experience can overcome: age. After decades working one of the world's most physically demanding professions, Wild Bill gradually stepped back from full-time participation. As his role diminished, so did the prominence of the Cape Caution. The boat didn't receive a dramatic farewell or headline-making exit. It simply faded from the series, alongside the captain who had made it famous. But perhaps the most mysterious example is the Ramblin' Rose. Unlike iconic vessels that dominated multiple seasons, the Ramblin' Rose developed a reputation for appearing, disappearing, and then unexpectedly returning. Its inconsistent presence left many casual viewers confused. Was it still fishing? Had Discovery dropped it? Was the captain no longer interested in participating? In reality, The answer appears far less dramatic. Deadliest Catch has always rotated vessels based on available crews, filming logistics, production priorities, and which stories producers believe will resonate most with audiences during a given season. Not every active crab boat appears every year, and not every disappearance signals a scandal. Sometimes, a vessel simply isn't part of the story producers choose to tell. That pattern is one of the least understood aspects of the series. Unlike scripted dramas with fixed casts, Deadliest Catch follows a constantly changing industry. Fishing quotas change. Captains retire. Boats are sold. Mechanical problems sideline vessels for entire seasons. Ownership disputes delay operations. Producers also make editorial decisions about which crews receive the most attention. This has fueled countless rumors over the years. Every time a familiar vessel disappears, online forums quickly fill with theories. Some speculate about hidden lawsuits. Others suspect safety violations, conflicts with producers, or personal disputes among captains. Occasionally, those theories prove correct. More often, the explanations turn out to be surprisingly ordinary. But because Discovery rarely pauses each season to explain every absence in detail, the mystery only grows. This brings us to one of the newest mysteries in Deadliest Catch history. Unlike the Cornelia Marie, Time Bandit, Saga, Cape Caution, or Ramblin' Rose, this vessel hadn't spent decades building its reputation. Instead, almost as soon as viewers became familiar with it, rumors spread across social media, claiming it had already disappeared. So, what became of the Aleutian Lady? The Aleutian Lady mystery. By now, viewers had seen legendary captains disappear and famous boats leave the fleet because of retirement, lawsuits, ownership disputes, or personal scandals. So when one of the show's newest vessels, the Aleutian Lady, seemed to fade into the background, many assumed history was repeating itself. Some claimed Discovery had quietly removed it from Deadliest Catch. But the deeper you investigate, the stranger the mystery becomes. The Aleutian Lady joined Deadliest Catch as one of the newer vessels introduced after many of the show's original captains had retired or left. It was captained by Rick Shelford, a veteran commercial fisherman with decades of experience in Alaska. But unlike stars such as Sig Hansen or Jonathan Hillstrand, Shelford wasn't already a television personality. The boat quickly became part of the fleet, fishing alongside familiar names like the Northwestern, Wizard, and Time Bandit. Then fans noticed something unusual. Compared with the show's established boats, the Aleutian Lady received relatively little screen time. Entire episodes passed with only brief appearances while producers focused on veteran captains and long-running storylines. That wasn't unusual by itself. Deadliest Catch has always shifted its focus depending on which crews have the most compelling season. But in the age of social media, every absence sparks speculation. Soon, viewers weren't just asking where the Aleutian Lady had gone. They were assuming it was gone. Rumors spread that Discovery had fired Rick Shelford, that the boat had been involved in safety violations, or that legal disputes had forced it off the show. Considering the series' long history of real controversies, those theories sounded believable. But there's one major problem. None of them are supported by evidence. Discovery has never announced that the Aleutian Lady was removed from Deadliest Catch. There was no statement about Captain Rick Shelford leaving, no cancellation notice, no documented lawsuits involving the vessel, and no Coast Guard enforcement action that sidelined it. Despite widespread rumors, there is no verified evidence that the boat was forced off the series. So why did so many people believe it? Part of the answer comes from the audience itself. Many longtime viewers criticized the Aleutian Lady's segments for focusing too much on crew conflict instead of fishing. Fans who preferred the documentary style of earlier seasons complained that producers were emphasizing interpersonal drama over commercial crabbing. Whether that criticism was fair or not, it led some viewers to assume Discovery might eventually stop featuring the boat. Another factor was simple editing. Deadliest Catch has never divided screen time equally among every vessel. Producers naturally focus on whichever crews experience dangerous weather, mechanical failures, medical emergencies, or exceptional catches. Some boats receive far more attention than others depending on the season. In the Aleutian Lady's case, inconsistent appearances were mistaken for evidence that it had quietly disappeared. Then, during February of 2026, a genuine tragedy struck. On February 25th, deckhand Todd Meadows, just 25 years old, fell overboard while the Aleutian Lady was fishing about 170 miles north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. The crew recovered him roughly 10 minutes later. Despite their efforts, he could not be revived. The United States Coast Guard opened a formal marine casualty investigation, as it does following fatal commercial fishing accidents. Authorities have not publicly alleged wrongdoing by the vessel or its crew, and the investigation focused on determining how the accident occurred. Captain Rick Shelford later called it the most tragic day in the history of the Aleutian Lady. Because Deadliest Catch was filming at the time, another difficult question emerged. The answer came from Todd Meadows' family. His mother asked that footage of her son's death never be aired, and Discovery honored that request. Instead, the season includes tributes to Meadows and footage recorded before the accident, avoiding the fatal incident itself. That decision sparked another wave of speculation. Before the season aired, some fans wondered whether Discovery would reduce the Aleutian Lady's presence out of respect for Todd and his family. Others assumed the boat would quietly disappear from the series altogether. But once again, there was no official announcement that the vessel had been removed. And that's the biggest twist in the entire story. You see, the Aleutian Lady did not disappear altogether. Rick Shelford remained captain. The vessel continued operating, and no documented scandal or regulatory action forced it off television. Instead, the mystery appears to have been created by a perfect storm of circumstances. Reduced screen time made viewers notice its absence. Criticism of the boat's storylines led some to believe Discovery wanted to move on. The show's long history of boats genuinely disappearing, from the Cornelia Marie to the Time Bandit and the Saga, made another departure seem entirely plausible. Then Todd Meadows' heartbreaking death added to the speculation. In the end, the evidence points to a surprising conclusion. The Aleutian Lady never actually disappeared. People simply believed it had. And perhaps that's the most fitting mystery Deadliest Catch has ever produced. Over more than 2 decades, the series has shown real storms, real danger, real tragedies, and real disappearances. But in this case, the biggest mystery wasn't hidden by Discovery or the crew. It was created by rumors, assumptions, and the internet's tendency to fill in gaps with stories. However, these next troubles were very real. What viewers never see behind the cameras. One of the biggest behind-the-scenes controversies in the show's history had nothing to do with the Bering Sea at all. It unfolded in courtrooms. During 2010, just as Deadliest Catch was becoming one of Discovery Channel's biggest successes, 3 of its most recognizable stars appeared ready to walk away. The Hillstrand brothers, Jonathan and Andy Hillstrand, captains of the Time Bandit, along with Captain Sig Hansen of the Northwestern, publicly announced they would not return for another season. Considering these men had become the faces of the series, the announcement sent shockwaves through the show's fan base. The reason had nothing to do with fishing. It centered on a legal dispute involving Discovery Communications and a spin-off project called Hill-Stranded. The Hill-Strand brothers had agreed to participate in the special, but Discovery later alleged they had failed to fulfill contractual obligations related to the production. The network filed a lawsuit seeking millions of dollars in damages, arguing that the brothers' actions had caused significant financial losses. Although Sig Hansen was not named in the lawsuit itself, he publicly supported the Hill-Strands, making it clear he would stand beside them if they chose to leave the series. For a brief period, the future of Deadliest Catch genuinely looked uncertain. The timing made the situation even more dramatic. The series was riding enormous ratings momentum following the death of Captain Phil Harris. Then, almost as quickly as the conflict erupted, it ended. Before the next season began, Discovery and the Hill-Strand brothers reached a settlement. Yet legal disputes are only part of the story. Another debate has followed Deadliest Catch almost since its first season, and it strikes at the heart of reality television itself. How much of what viewers watch is happening naturally, and how much is shaped after the fact? The biggest misconception about Deadliest Catch is confusing editing with faking. There is no credible evidence that Discovery stages the crab fishing itself. The dangerous weather, brutal working conditions, tight fishing seasons, and financial stakes are all real. Where the debate begins is in post-production. Each season generates hundreds of hours of footage that producers condense into a handful of episodes, often rearranging scenes, inserting interviews recorded later, and occasionally asking participants to repeat conversations or simple actions when audio or camera angles were unusable. These are standard documentary techniques that help tell a clearer story, not evidence that major events were scripted. Critics also argue that producers emphasize conflicts between captains while leaving out long periods of routine cooperation, creating the impression of constant rivalry. Moreover, Discovery's production crew doesn't watch safely from shore. They live aboard the vessels, working through the same storms, freezing spray, and unpredictable conditions. Several production crew members have suffered injuries over the years. The series has documented camera operators being knocked down by waves, struck by swinging equipment, and working while surrounded by crashing seas. Perhaps the strongest evidence against claims that Deadliest Catch is completely scripted comes from the moments no producer could possibly plan. Captain Phil Harris's fatal stroke, mechanical failures that cost boats valuable fishing time, men falling asleep from exhaustion after working for more than 20 hours, crew members quitting in the middle of a season, fatal accidents connected to cast members away from filming. However, after years of watching legendary boats disappear for perfectly real reasons, and after learning how production decisions can influence what audiences see, fans began asking the same question about a newcomer named the Aleutian Lady. This time, however, the mystery wasn't hiding behind the cameras. It was hiding in plain sight. Outro. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.